All right. Hello everybody. I'm back again with the third day of watching one movie and leaving a review about it. Um, so earlier today I watched Clerks, and Clerks was a pretty good film, I will say. Um, what I do want to bring up is how like this movie shouldn't even really exist. Uh, Kevin Smith, the director of this movie, had like zero budget to make this movie. Um, it had a actually less than $30,000. It had a $27,575 budget, and ended up bringing in $3.15 million in the box office, making this like a major success. Um, that's like what, like 100 times the budget, which is that's genuinely amazing. Um, and yeah, I just wanted to offer my appreciation for how much work was put in for this movie, and you can really see that this is a very passion-filled project, and I think that adds to the movie a lot. Um, I also just wanted to bring up that this movie is just very intuitive. All right, so I kind of forgot to mention what I really thought was intuitive about this movie, like mid review. So I'm coming back in the post to tell you what I thought. Um, what's really intuitive about this movie is the fact that it's shot in black and white, one, due to budget constraint, but two, it actually helped them a lot because Kevin Smith was working at the gas station where they shot Clerks, and during the day he had to work, so they could only shoot during the night. And the reason why black and white film helped them out so much was because they were able to conceal the fact that it was nighttime inside the gas station. So yeah, forgot to add that. And I'll just get into that when I talk about the cinematography. But moving on from my appreciation of how the movie was produced, let's get into the movie, and let's get into the writing. So Clerks is it's a very dialogue heavy movie, and the script is pretty much just filled with the characters interacting and talking to each other, which is fine. Um, you know, I will say that I do personally think that the jokes really do hit the mark for this movie. I laughed a lot while watching this, and the comedy just feels really fluid and natural compared to something like Novocaine. It just feels so much more smooth, and it just fits the story and characters so much better. Yeah, the comedy was honestly great. Not much more to elaborate on that. Comedy is subjective, so if you didn't think the movie was funny, then you didn't think the movie was funny. I really enjoyed the dialogue. I feel like that's one of the things that really stood out to me in Clerks, is that the writing was very strong. I think that the dialogue between the characters is amazing, and some of the scenes where you get these one-on-one interactions with the characters, and they're having this great conversation that may be a little explicit to an extent, but at the same time, I think the explicitness really helps in favor of what this movie is trying to say to you, or what message this movie wants you to bring home. So I think that the dialogue is great. It can be a little unnatural, and you can kind of see that some of these actors are messing up, but we'll get into that later when we talk about the cinematography again, because I feel like the cinematography plays into a big part about why maybe some people feel like the dialogue isn't strong or the acting isn't strong. But in my personal opinion, I just thought that the characters and the way they speak to each other is very natural, and just like the dialogue just felt very modern to me. Like the way they wrote this movie, it feels like it wasn't written in 94, if that makes sense. So really enjoyed that. I will say that I do think that the narrative for this movie is a pretty simple narrative. Not necessarily, it being simple being a bad thing, but in a sense, like, I think that the story is pretty easy to follow if you're just paying attention. But the characters, on the other hand, are super interesting. And, that's definitely where this movie shines, is the characters and dialogue within the writing. And yeah, it like I said, like, the dialogue, the writing feels very modern. So it just feels like it ages super well into, like, me watching it in 2025. And in terms of actual script writing, right, like, the script has great setup and payoff. They address basically everything that they set up towards the end of the movie, and it's great. It doesn't leave you with any of these open questions because they address everything, which is great. I also really enjoyed the premise of taking accountability for your life and for your actions. I just feel like is such a great theme and message, even though it's very explicit how it's said. I still just think that that as the resounding message of your movie just makes it feel really, like, down to earth, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's really all I have to say about the writing. It's very strong. I would only say that, like, it's just a little too dialogue heavy, and the narrative could be a little deeper. But other than that, like, great writing. To move on to the acting, I don't really have much to say about the acting of the characters. Dante and Randall's characters and their actors, they were great on screen together. I thought that they had very good on-screen chemistry, and I feel like they really tied this movie together. The only other real thing I have to say about the acting is, I feel like it could have been stronger all around the board for some of these people, but to give them some leeway, this is like one of their first times acting in a movie like this, so you just got to give your props to them for that, because it's still pretty good. I wouldn't say it's like great or like, oh wow, this acting blew my mind or anything, but it's still good. Now to move on to the cinematography, which I kind of want to talk about a lot, because of the fact that this movie didn't have a lot of budget, and one of my biggest questions while watching this movie was, like, is the amount of one takes in this because of the fact that there was like a huge budget constraint and they could only shoot in black and white film, or was that a stylistic choice? Because the amount of one takes is cool. I think it's a really good display of how well these characters can interact and how well these actors can say all their lines before the take ends. But at the same time, it doesn't have a very interesting shot selection throughout the film, and also the amount of one takes that do take place kind of slows down the film a lot, because I think it's because of the lack of cutting. I just realized while watching Clerks, like, the lack of cutting really does emphasize the pace and how long the movie is, which at some points I feel like it can take away from the movie, but I didn't really get too bothered by that while watching. So, yeah, take that as you will. To I guess elaborate more on the cinematography, I just wish that there was more dynamic shots within it. I just feel like the cinematography was very average, and it didn't have a really like intuitive or interesting shot selection. But then again, budget constraints, and there's not a lot of budget given to this film. But in my personal opinion, I don't really think that you can not have an interesting shot selection regardless of what film you're making and budget, because it's all just camera orientation. So that's what I think. To move on to the pacing, ease of enjoyment, and ease of watching, like I really enjoyed Clerks. I thought that for the most part the jokes, like, it's entertaining, the dialogue is very interesting to just take a look into, and you can tell that there's just so much passion behind this film, which just really adds to how easy it is to watch. Another thing that really adds to this movie is the soundtrack. I think the soundtrack really adds to this movie, and without the songs that they picked for it, I really don't think it would have been paced the same way, or it had been that easy, or it wouldn't have been that easy to have watched. So and yeah, like that's really those are my thoughts about Clerks. I gave Clerks a 4 on letterboxd, and yeah, I feel like most of the negative qualities can't detriment more than like 1 star off this film. And like I said, like I think everything else around it is 4-star worthy, and it's very impressive to just see like how like that this movie even had success and was able to be released just because of the amount of constraints around the film while it was being made. So yeah, go watch Clerks, and yeah, that's my review for today. Thank you.